It's the preview show. It's the No Nay Never podcast.
Hello and welcome to the preview show brought to you by the No Nay Never podcast. I'm your host, Natalie Bromley, but joining me is the main man himself, the headliner and the star of the preview show, Dave Statman Roberts. Dave, welcome back.
Hello, Natalie. Good to be back.
It is always good to be back. My favourite time of the week. I love the preview show. How the devil have you been since we last spoke pre-Everton?
Yeah, not too bad. It's getting close to Christmas. We've got football games coming up and midweek games after this one. And it's going to be a busy time, isn't it?
Yeah, it really is. I was thinking this the other day, actually. I've managed so far to try and be all right about the lack of live football, but it started to make me feel really sad, especially when I was thinking about Boxing Day, and you usually go to football on Boxing Day and stuff, and just the joy of live Christmas fixtures. We're going to miss a lot this year, aren't we? It's going to be really sad.
There's no game on Boxing Day, but we've. I think it's the first time since 2004 we won't have actually played on Boxing Day itself. The Leeds game.
Oh, is that true?
Yeah,
it's been moved, hasn't it?
Yeah, it's on the Sunday now, on the 27th.
Yeah, I think obviously they're trying to get as many games televised over Christmas. But yeah, I think obviously Boxing Day is a pinnacle, but I was just thinking mainly, football across the Christmas period. And like New Year's Day as well, you tend to go like a little bit hungover on New Year's Day as well. Not that I don't drink, kids. It's not big and it's not clever. Good win, though. Good point against Everton in the end, I thought. I think some people were disappointed that it wasn't a win, but actually, on paper, I think that's going to end up being a really important point for us.
It's one of those where it could have gone either way, but equally we could have lost the game. We had a couple of good saves from Nick Pope in there. They had a couple of really good chances, and Pickford made a couple of good saves as well. So it was a decent game end to end, and probably in the end a point was maybe a fair result for both sides. We obviously getting an early goal going into the lead. It's disappointing we didn't hang on to that, but at the end of the day, yeah, not a bad point against Everton, I would say, on the balance of things.
I agree. I know they're going through a difficult patch at the moment, but they are still a top side, and I think to be able to get those points against them is going to be really good. And we are starting to just get back to the performance levels, I think, as well, which is good. And I just think, to me, it makes a massive difference having Jay up front. I much prefer that partnership than I do Wood and Barnes, so I approve of that. But let's get into this week's show, shall we, Dave? And before we get into the nitty-gritty of previewing this week's fixture, we have a quiz question that we need to have a look at. Oh, I've lost my place in my script. Hang on a second. Where are we? Last week's quiz question. Now, of course, we had a guest quizmaster last week, and our question was set by none other than John Robertson, who asked our listeners, the African Footballer of the Year award has been won 4 times by just 2 players. Yaya Toure is one, and the other player scored twice in a man-of-the-match display in a Premier League game for Everton at Turf Moor. Who is that player? Dave, what was the answer?
The correct answer was Samuel Eto'o.
Excellent. Did we get any results in from listeners?
John Robertson didn't get it right this week because he set the question. I think he knew the answer, but we're not letting him have it this week. We did have a couple of others. David Entwistle was in touch with the correct answer, as was James Brunskill. I think they were the only 2 we had.
Yeah, they are. Well, I've got to say, I really enjoyed having a guest quizmaster this week. So if any of you listeners out there have got, have a look at the fixtures coming up. We want it to be relevant to the game. So obviously don't send us one for Arsenal away because we're going to do that this week. But if you have a look at the fixtures coming up and you want to send us a really good quiz question relevant to a game that we're playing, then send it through to us usual manner. Either tweet us at nonaynever or send us an email at podcast@nonaynever.net. Is that right? Podcast@nonaynever.net. Doubting myself then, young Dave. And yes, send us your question in there because I very much enjoyed having a guest quiz. But for now, we are back to Quizmaster boss extraordinaire Dave, who will be giving us this week's question at the end of the show. So make sure you stay tuned.
I've got an evil one for later as well.
Really?
Well,
That's evil.
it's not evil. It's just a little bit different. It's not something you would either know the answer to straight off your head. So it's maybe one where you've got to make an educated guess at. We might have a range of answers, so just a little bit
Really?
different. Yeah.
I bet John Robertson knows it off the top of his head.
No, he won't.
Really? Oh, I'm excited. Oh, I can't wait. This is going to be really good. Well, stay tuned, folks. Stay tuned.
Opposition stats.
Okay, so let's have a look at this week's opposition, Dave. And we are, of course, playing our old enemies, Arsenal, away. And it's going to be on Sunday the 13th of December. And it's a 7:15 kick-off live on Sky Sports. Why don't you kick off this week's preview, Dave, by telling us the recent history of this fixture, including last season's meeting?
For our retrospective comparisons this season, we've focused on the recent corresponding fixtures. So this week, that means all the matches played at Arsenal since 2009-10. During this time, we've played 7 times at Ashburton Grove, which you may or may not realise was the proper name given to Arsenal's new stadium, prior to a sponsor being found. Sadly for us, we failed to win any of these games, and the goals tally during this time is 20 for Arsenal to Burnley's 5. And although we've scored in 5 of the 7 recent games, 6 of which were in the Premier League plus 1 cup tie, we've yet to come away with a single point. Last season, Alexander Lacazette scored the opening goal for the hosts, with Ashley Barnes grabbing an equaliser just before half-time. However, it was Pierre-Emerick Aubameyang who scored for the Gunners in the second half to ensure the 3 points once again stayed in North London.
Excellent.
Highlights and lowlights.
Right, well, what about the highlight and lowlight section? Why don't we start off by saying what the highlight of this fixture is, which I believe is going to be merged this week with Burnley's last top-flight win?
Well, it's our last league win, home or away. We've not beaten them in the
Ooh.
league at home since this time either, and then we'll come on to that in another stat later on. But yeah, the last time Burnley won a game at Arsenal, the Osmonds were top of the UK singles chart with Love Me for a Reason.
No.
And Harold Wilson was Prime Minister.
Wow.
That might give you a clue that it was quite some time ago. In 1974, and to be more precise, the September of that year, when Burnley were last successful on a visit to Arsenal. That match was, of course, played at Highbury. Arsenal were managed by Bertie Mee, and Jimmy Adamson's Burnley team, wearing navy blue shirts, were 1-0 winners thanks to a 78th minute goal from Peter Noble. A long, high cross into the box was headed down by Paul Fletcher to Peter Noble, who beat Arsenal goalkeeper Jimmy Rimmer to guide the ball just inside the near post from close range. The match was also shown as a second game on the BBC's flagship football programme Match of the Day. Since then, we've suffered 9 consecutive away defeats in all competitions, and we'll be hoping to reverse that trend this weekend.
We will, and listeners, this is not great radio, but as the saying goes, but Dave's actually put a clip of that goal in the show notes here for me in my script, and I'm just watching it as he's talking, and it's God, it looks like just a completely different world that you're watching. First and foremost, it feels weird seeing all of those fans in the stadium, and secondly, it feels really weird seeing us playing in blue.
Yeah, we wore that for a couple of seasons in the mid-70s. It's like a navy blue shirt with claret trim and then light blue shorts.
Yeah, I mean, it's not the blue that we know and love in ours. It's not like just having a predominantly the blue from Claret and blue on the away shirt, guys. It's properly like royal. I won't say it's navy, but I think it's royal blue.
Royal blue. We wore it for the 1947 FA Cup final against Charlton as well.
There you go. Well, try and check that out, listeners, if you can. It's a joy. Okay, on the flip side of that then, Dave, we must have a corresponding low light to talk about.
Yeah, there are a few to choose from, but this week's low light, we've selected Burnley's heaviest recent away defeat at the hands of Arsenal, and that came towards the end of the 2017-18 season. You may remember that was Arsene Wenger's final home game in charge of Arsenal, and his team gave him a happy send-off at Burnley's expense with an emphatic 5-0 win. There was still a silver lining for Burnley fans, as despite the defeat in this match, and another in our final game of that season, which was at home to Bournemouth, we still finished 7th and earned our place in Europe for the first time in 50 years.
I see. Not that low light. Not that low.
Heroes and villains.
Next section then, all of our heroes and villains of this fixture. Why don't we start with the good thing, and who have you picked for our hero?
Well, Burnley haven't always had such a poor record in away games at Arsenal. In fact, in the 1950s and 1960s, 3 Burnley players scored hat-tricks in Burnley wins at Highbury. Those players were Bill Holden, John Connelly and Ray Pointer. But for being the last Burnley player to score a goal in an away win at Arsenal, as mentioned already in our highlights section, we can't really look any further than the late, great Peter Noble as our hero for this week. It was actually during the No Nay Never live event at Turf Moor back in May 2017 that news broke about the death of Peter Noble, and as a Burnley legend, we know he's still sadly missed. However, let's hope we can find ourselves a new hero in North London this weekend.
Yeah, fingers crossed. And on the flip side then, Dave, who have you picked as our villain? God, I bet there's a few you could have gone through for this.
Our villain this week, I'm looking forward to hearing how producer Matt copes with this in the edit, but I've disobeyed strict instructions and taken the unusual step this week of combining our villain section with our one to watch.
It's the villain to watch.
That's because a player with a knack of notching goals for Arsenal against Burnley is a current player, and one we'll need to keep a very close eye on this Sunday. So that player and our joint villain and one to watch is Pierre-Emerick Aubameyang.
No! God, please, no! No! No!
The 31-year-old Frenchman has scored 270 career goals in just over 500 club matches, as well as 26 goals in 65 matches for his country. He scored the winning goal in the corresponding fixture last season, and he also scored a brace in our away games at Arsenal in each of the previous 2 seasons, giving him 5 goals in our last 3 visits there. He may have been less prolific so far this season. He's only scored twice in Arsenal's 11 Premier League games to date in 2020/21, and he's drawn a blank in all of Arsenal's last 4 games in the Premier League. However, we know he's still a dangerous player, and so as well as being our villain for his past goal-scoring exploits against us, that's why he's still our one to watch as well.
Excellent. And then finally then, who's going to be overseeing proceedings at the weekend? Who's our referee?
We've got Graham Scott of Abingdon in Oxfordshire. He'll be in charge of this Sunday evening's match. He's refereed 16 previous Burnley games since 2011, although only 6 of those have been in the Premier League. We've won 3 of those 6 Premier League matches, so not a bad record. And that includes both the games he was in charge of last season. They were the home games against Southampton and also against Everton, so a 3-0 win and a 1-0 win. He showed a red card to Seamus Coleman in the match against Everton last October, and his only other red card in a match involving Burnley was way back in 2011 when he dismissed Coventry City's Gail Bigirimana. I think I've pronounced that right. Graham Scott will be supported in Stockley Park on Sunday by David Coote, who's the video assistant referee for this game.
Excellent. Thank you very much, Dave.
Statman Dave's Stat of the Week.
I know we're not going to leave it there. And our listeners know not we're going to leave it there because we do this every single week. You need to spoil our listeners, and it's coming up to Christmas, so put that Santa hat on, please. Delve into the deep pockets of Statman Dave and give us your miscellaneous stat of the week.
Yeah, well, this week's miscellaneous stat of the week is Arsenal are the only team out of the so-called Big 6 English clubs which Burnley have yet to beat in a Premier League game, home or away.
Ooh.
Both Manchester teams, as well as Liverpool, Chelsea and Spurs, have all suffered Premier League losses against the Clarets. But Arsenal have won 10 and drawn 2 of the 12 Premier League games in which they've faced Burnley. Our only points were from 2 drawn matches played at Turf Moor. In fact, I think I'm right in saying that Burnley's current winless run of 15 league matches against Arsenal, that's home and away, which includes the games played since our victory at Highbury in 1974, is the longest of any other opposition team we've played. Our only win against Arsenal during that time is a League Cup victory at Turf Moor in 2008, when Kevin McDonald scored both our goals.
That is a good miscellaneous stat of the week. I approve. Now, before we go on to have a quick look at this week's game, we do have a few comments from our opposition this week. We caught up with Jason McKenna. Where's Jason McKenna from, Dave? Does he have a podcast? Does he have a...
He did. He was on the. He had a fantasy Premier League podcast he did last season. Doesn't do that anymore. But he does some stuff with Ben Dinnery, who does quite a lot of stuff on Premier League injuries. So if you've seen him on Twitter, he's involved with that as well. So he mentions it in his piece.
Brilliant. Well, let's have a listen to see what Jason McKenna had to say.
Opposition view.
Hello everybody, and thank you once again to Dave for inviting me actually onto the No Nay Never podcast. I was on last year talking about this same fixture because, of course, I'm a Gooner, I'm an Arsenal fan, but I think we're talking in very different circumstances this year. So just a quick background on my life as an Arsenal fan. I lived through the Wenger years. He was basically my only manager that I knew. I was young enough probably that Bruce Rioch was in charge, but I don't remember him. It was always Arsene Wenger. But unlike some people of my age group, I did know that Arsenal existed before Arsene Wenger, and so it wasn't named after him. But yes, so I live in North London. I live kind of near the stadium, but some people say, oh, well, you should support Tottenham because that is your local club there. But, you know, my family have kind of close links to the club. My dad worked there. My granddad used to go there all the time. When he was in the Navy, he used to love watching football, and to get a cheap opportunity to go to Highbury was a real pleasure for him. So that was where the Arsenal kind of route took place in the McKenna family. Now, talking about the here and now, you know, I've given a bit of historical perspective on my kind of personal links to the club, and we've had many glory years over the years. You know, I was lucky enough to see our exploits in the Champions League, getting to a final, our previous winning of the Premier League in the Invincible season, and of course our most recent FA Cup win with our current manager, Mikel Arteta. But this season, the funny thing is, and I can point to, you know, my works through the summer building up to this season during this very strange, odd, short COVID crisis time, but I didn't expect a lot from this season, and I was a bit critical of the signing of Partey. I wasn't sure if Willing was the right kind of person. David Luiz getting a contract extension. And looking at the data of the last couple of seasons of Arsenal, under Emery and then under Arteta, the team weren't good. They weren't creating a lot of chances, and we were kind of biding our time, riding our luck with the fact that Aubameyang was so good at putting away so many chances. And this season, I just think that luck has caught up with us. We're in a rebuilding period. I was expecting maybe Europa League, but probably that's not likely now because there's so many teams better than us in the league. But in terms of it, I don't think Arsenal have improved that much. But to the same extent, I'm not hypercritical of Arteta because I understand that the club is in a bit of a pathway between one kind of era and another, and I think Arteta's doing a good job at trying to usher that in. He's shown some inexperience even this weekend, you know, with the Partey situation of kind of pushing him on even though he was injured. But there's been many moments as well of positives where he's shown real tactical nous. So I'm not too kind of critical of that. But looking at the numbers, looking at the data, Arsenal and our fan base can't really be too mad because you look at the chances created data, Arsenal are bottom 4. Then you look at the big chances created, Arsenal in the bottom half of the table. Shots inside the box, bottom half of the table. XG non-penalty, Arsenal are bottom half of the table. And even looking at the goalkeeping kind of data, yes, it's all right, but Arsenal aren't, you know, top. They're not top 4, they're not 10 with this kind of data. So I wasn't expecting a lot this season, and maybe, you know, I'm kind of neutral towards this. I'm neither disappointed nor elated. I think we're doing about how we expect to be. I expect the lineup, there might be a fiddle about, obviously with the Partey injury and maybe Pepe might get a showing out there because just things haven't been going right. So looking at that chances created data so far this season, there's something lacking in the midfield. And, one of the people that people have voiced as one of the players that people have voiced as somebody that should be out there is Mesut Ozil, and he's a fantastic chance creator. But we do have some other players in the team that can do that. I think there'll be a continuation probably of some of the players that played in the North London derby. I think, even with Bellerin getting criticised, even with Tierney not having a great game, I think they'll continue within the squad. Aubameyang is kind of nailed in there. The question will be, will Lacazette start? Will Pepe? Will Willian? And I think, again, this might play into the fact of the problems that we've had so far this season. We know that Arsenal will play a possession game. They will try and create chances down the wings, but maybe too many crosses and not enough balls through the insides. The tactics I can expect, from both teams, I don't think there'll be a lot of goals. Both teams haven't created a lot of chances this season, and both teams have been relatively sturdy in defence. I mean, if you look at the expected goals conceded data, Burnley and Arsenal are almost matched. Burnley have an expected goals of 12.96 conceded, and Arsenal of 13.23. And what's interesting is both sides have underperformed that a little bit as well. I think one of the key players for Burnley that Arsenal are going to have to watch out for is Chris Wood. He seems to have found his feet a little bit more, but I think the team are ticking over really nicely now. Again, at the start of the season, a lot of people were tipping Burnley for relegation and big worries, but the core of that squad are strong. I think if injuries come into play again like they did at the start of the season, then Burnley have problems. But overall, I say that the starting 11, the best 11 of Burnley, are a strong group of individuals, and teams have to be worried. We've seen over the course of this season that Burnley have underperformed their expected metrics and data. But historically, we know that Burnley actually almost always exceed it. And so I think teams have to really watch out and see that this will be a Burnley team, once again, defending deep. They'll get some good goals from physical situations. And I can see that Arsenal will struggle. My scoreline prediction might be a 1-1 or a 0-0. I see it as being a draw this game, and I think it would probably be fully deserved because I think both teams are on a similar level at the moment, which is a weird thing to say. But I think Pope will be so influential in this because obviously the way that Burnley play, they allow a lot of shots but not of high quality, and then Pope just, magically, almost on another level, he can defend that goal so well. So, yeah, I think there's a lot of positives that Burnley fans can actually look forward to in this game, maybe over previous seasons, because obviously the record with Burnley and Arsenal hasn't been great, but this could even be an opportunity for the team to nick a win. And just adding to maybe another player that I think has done well this season is Westwood. Ashley Westwood, he's got 1 goal, 1 assist, but I think he's been quite the good performer so far this season. I think Chris Wood, Arsenal, will really have to watch out for him. And I'm hoping for a good game. I'm hoping for a good performance from my Arsenal side, but I also understand that probably we're not going to see 3 points from this one. So, that's my thoughts and feelings. And as I said previously on the No Nay Never podcast as well, I have such a warm affinity for Burnley. I think they're such a great club. I have massive respect for Sean Dyche. And I just feel a real pleasure to chat to you guys every so often, a few times a season. It is a real pleasure. And I look forward to being on again. And hopefully, when I come on again, we can talk about both clubs having a really good run, because Arsenal certainly need it, and I know that Burnley certainly do have the talent to do it. So I'm Jason McKenna. You can find me on Twitter, Jason_R_McKenna. I do a bit of analysis of football, That's my job with actually Premier Injuries with Ben Dinnery, but I also do some political broadcasting as well. A weird mix, I know, but if you want to know anything about politics as well, you can find out from my Twitter, or if you want to find anything about Premier League data, you can find that as well from my content. But thanks again to the team at the No Nay Never podcast. Thank you for having me on, and I look forward to a really good game this weekend.
So what are you feeling about the weekend, Dave? I always think coming up to this fixture that this will be the one that we finally get to beat Arsenal, but just as I was thinking last season it was our best chance to beat them, they seem to be finding their feet a little bit again. They seem to be getting a little bit better again, and the record doesn't exactly fill me with confidence, does it? How are you feeling?
Well, if you base it purely on our past record, there, you'd think, well, yeah, it's a write-off. But yeah, they have struggled this season. They've not done quite as well, and it's you don't want to say it again, but there is perhaps the thought that it is a good time to play them. I'm thinking that yes, it's possible we could get a win, but I'm leaning more towards a draw. I think Burnley might get a point. I'm going to predict a 1-1 draw for Sunday's game.
And what do you think? I know obviously we don't have an awful lot of choice, but what do you think he'll do in terms of players?
He may well keep the same side if, assuming everyone's available for that. Obviously, we're recording earlier on this. We've not had the press conference. We don't know if there's any surprises in that. I think they'll normally have that on the Friday for the Sunday game. So by the time this podcast goes out, they'll have had the press conference, but not when we're recording it now. So yeah, all being well, I think it may well be the same 11.
Yeah, fingers crossed. A score draw or a 0-0? What do you think?
A score draw. I'm going for a 1-1.
Excellent. Well, I think we're going to win. I'm going to go 1-0. I think we're going to nick it. So there you go. What are your predictions, listeners? If you're listening to this, plenty of time. You've got all weekend to listen to this before we play on Sunday night. So why don't you drop us your predictions, tweet us at NoNayNever, or email us at podcast@nonaynever.net.
Fantasy Premier League update.
And we wrap up this week's show, Dave, with a look at the Fantasy Premier League. What on earth went on, please, in game week 11?
Yes, well, we have had 11 completed game weeks now in the Fantasy Premier League, and our top 5 players, again, we've had a little bit of movement in the top 5. We've got a non-mover, though, at number 5. Graham Jennings is in 5th place on 687 points. Craig Smith's down to 4th on 688. Joanne Butterworth gone back up again, had a really good week this week.
Yay!
Up to 3rd position on 698 points. We've then got Ursay in 2nd place with 704 points. And then our leader has been leader for quite a while now, David Miller, has extended his lead a little bit again this week. He's on 721 points at the top of the league.
That is exciting. I'm very glad to see Joanne back in there. I said last week, it was my Gina on last week that I knew was going to do. How are we doing, Dave?
Oh, you've gone up again. You're up 4 places.
Yay!
Yeah. At 234th you're in now out of 241. That's 61 points for the week and 462 overall. And I notice, as well as being above James Bird, which is still above, you're above Adam Howarth as well.
Really? Oh, this is outstanding. This is the originals, the original team No Nay Never, who all abandoned me to run the podcast, and I'm by myself, the swine. So I take small wins from this. I'm beating them at fantasy football. What about the current cohort of No Nay Never teams? How is everybody else doing?
Well, Richard Steele remains the best place of the No Nay Never podcasters, and he's climbed again. He's up to 32nd place now, so he's on the way up. He's way ahead of the rest of us, and he's gone up. But I didn't mention me. I'd actually gone up as well. I was up 13 places, that is, from 129th to 116th. So mid-table, but not too bad. Not too bad after a slow start.
Yeah, you forgot yourself, Dave. That's no good. You forgot yourself. Richard Steele's ridiculously good at fantasy football. It makes me annoyed. Team of the week. On my script, Dave Roberts, it says "Wing it!" ! What?
Just use the list, yes, because this was obviously a very well-prepared section we had this week when we came to start recording the show. Let listeners in on a little secret here that I hadn't actually updated the Fantasy Premier League at all, so I
We had game
frantically...
week 10.
Yeah, frantic. Good job we realised beforehand, isn't it, really?
But I have to say, listeners, even though we're letting you into this little secret, we had to press pause on recording for about 5 minutes while we went on mute while Dave went away to sort it. So when he was going away to sort it, I thought he was actually sorting it rather than just using that time to stick wing it in the script. Thanks, Dave. Okay, well, let's use the list that we've got on here for game week 11.
That would be a good idea, yes.
What players got in the team of the week?
Well, we had formation for the team of the week, the Kings of Game Week 11. We had a goalkeeper, 3 defenders, 5 midfielders, and 2 strikers. So we had Kelleher in goal. We had 3 defenders were Matip, Vestergaard, and Zuma. Our midfield was Zaha, De Bruyne, Salah, Son, and Sterling. And we had Benteke and Kane in front. And although we were not as prepared as perhaps we should have been on this section, we did have time before the show to check the values of the players, which we talked about once or twice in previous weeks, and we're in a situation where you could easily afford all the players. But looking at those players, we've got Kane, Sterling, Son, Salah, De Bruyne, Zaha, probably 5 or 6 players there of the more expensive players. I don't think you'd be able to afford them, would you?
That is correct. We did do a very quick calculation. As was expected, I got a little bit bored of that feature straight away. I was like, yeah, I'm not doing this every week because I've got an attention span of a gnat. But this week, when we looked at some of the absolute stars in there, we correctly guessed that there was no way you'd be able to get all of those players in one team, and you were correct. I think the actual cost of it, did we say, was 87.9, something like that?
89, yeah, just under 90 million, wasn't
just
it, for
under
the
90
11
million,
players?
yeah.
But then obviously you've got to realise you've got to keep some money aside for your substitutes
yes,
as well.
Yes, you do. So we even if we chose the absolute, I think 4 million's the cheapest player you can get. So even if we just got token for 16 million for 4 token players to build up your squad, that took you well over, and the final figure would have been 105.3 million. So that is an affirm, young listeners. We could not afford the team of the week this week. But do keep trying, obviously. I've just realised we were supposed to get Bennett Howarth on this week. I forgot. This has been, listeners,
I'm glad it's not just me.
A highly successful recording of this week's preview show. Not only did we have the wrong week we had game week 10, not game week 11. Dave forgot to do the whole script for fantasy football, then just told me to wing it, and I forgot to book Bennett on. So, Bennett, if you're listening to this, I'm so sorry. We will get you on next week because we are clearly absolute clowns. We promise you in the run-up to the Christmas fixtures, we will get reigning champion Bennett Howarth on, who will give us a refresher of those tips of how to get through the festive period and how to use those weird magical cheat things that you have that you can use. I still don't know how they work out. So eyes peeled for reaction to that. We will get him on next week.
It might be a good opportunity as well to do that because we won't be able to do a proper update, I don't think, for the next one with the recording timescales.
That is true. So we've got quite a few. We're starting to get into silly season, listeners, with fixtures now. So the plan is Dave and I are going to record the fake Friday preview show on Sunday, straight after the game, we think. And we obviously, because we are recording early because of the midweek fixture, we won't have had all of game week 12 played out. So we'll get Bennett on instead. So there you go. Look at that. How wonderfully that all came round for us, Dave. Well planned. Well saved.
Statman Dave's quiz question.
And then let's close out this show then, Dave, with the homework for this week, please. What quiz question are you setting for our listeners?
Right, we mentioned it before. This Wits quiz question is a little bit different, and we want to know, Burnley's latest visit to play Arsenal will be our 50th away league game against the Gunners. But how many goals have Burnley scored in our previous 49 away visits in league games up to the end of the 2019-20 season?
There you go. Now I understand.
So this is a sort of question, I think, where we expect to receive lots of guesses, but which of our listeners will be the closest?
Yeah, it's a bit like what's the word that you get? Is it a tiebreaker when you get a quiz question and you've got a tiebreaker? Yeah, this is more of a tiebreaker. If anybody, and by anybody I mean John Robertson, gets this spot on, then they've absolutely cheated and googled it. That is a great question, Dave. So how do our listeners submit their guess, please?
Well, the best way is to get in touch. You can tweet us or send us a direct message, preferably on Twitter. That's at NoNayNever. Email us, podcast@nonaynever.net, or you can reply to the post for the preview show on the No Nay Never Facebook page. And hopefully, well, we will reveal the correct answer at the start of the next preview show, and hopefully we'll have had some responses in time to be able to mention those as well.
Excellent. Well, what a good do. Now, do we have anything in terms of updates for people? Obviously, we've given people the updated fixtures. They've not changed. Have we got any community news or anything that we need to update our listeners this week?
Nothing I could think of, no.
Okay, good. Well, that's then all we've got time for, folks. Thank you very much for listening as ever. My thanks firstly go to Jason McKenna, who provided our opposition view this week, to Turf Moor Stadium announcer Dominic Walker, who has specially recorded preview show announcements. We've said this a few times, whilst we can't go to Turf Moor, we bring Turf Moor to you. To produce a map for knitting this all together and getting it out for us, but finally to you, Dave, for all of the hard work that you put in here. He never puts, he's so humble, is Dave. In my show script, he puts a list of all the people that we need to thank so we don't forget, and he never ever puts himself on there. And this show just does not happen without you, Dave Roberts. You do it all. I'm just the conductor. You are absolutely the main guy. So thank you, Dave, for once again putting together a fantastic show. Our final thanks go to you, the listener, for downloading and listening to this podcast. Your support is very much appreciated, and we would not be here without you. There's not been, it's because it's been a silly season at the moment and we've been struggling a little bit with work. We've not had a Tuesday night show this week analysing the Everton game, but the rest of the team will be back next week and we'll have a look at the Everton fixture, Arsenal away, and the run up to the Christmas fixture. So keep an eye out for that. Dave and I will be back at some point next week, show times to be confirmed, to preview the next game, which is, Dave?
We're away at Aston Villa. That's a 6 o'clock kickoff on Thursday the 17th. So I'm guessing we've recorded the weekend. Matt might put that out Monday or Tuesday.
Definitely. Excellent. In the meantime, people stay safe, wear a mask where you can, look after yourselves and your loved ones, and we're getting closer to the end of 2020 and this horrible, horrible year will finally be at the back of us. If any of our listeners are struggling or you're feeling isolated or alone or just really fed up with this year, the lines to No Nay Never are always open. Do get in touch if you want to be our pen pal and write to us. We're very good at answering mail, so if you want to drop us an email, we'll happily write back. Or if you just want to interact with us on Twitter, you know how to, and we'll more than happily keep you company. Stay safe in the meantime, people. This has been the preview show brought to you by the No Nay Never podcast. Until next time.